This week at the box office, Shazam holds on to be number one for the second week in a row. Elsewhere, little proves to be big at the box office, and Hellboy doesn't catch fire, but catches a lot of flack from critics and fans alike. All this and more on this episode of The Weekend Take.
You're listening to The Weekend Take, and now your host, Sean Schaefer.
Hello everyone, and welcome to The Weekend Take. I'm your host, Sean Schaefer, and joining me this week as my special guest is actor, writer, and producer for Never Surrender Films, Becky Haney. Becky, how are you doing this week?
I'm great, Sean. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing well. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. For those of you new to the show, The Weekend Take is a weekly podcast that breaks down the weekend box office results, but also looks beyond the numbers at the current topics and trends of the film industry. We'll get started the way we do every week by looking at the films that left the top 10. This week, there were 4 films that left the top 10. The first film to leave the countdown this week was How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World from Universal, which dropped from the number 10 position down to number 16. The film took in $730,000, a 63% drop from last week. It lost over half of its screens, losing 1,106 screens to bring its count down to 822. An $888 per screen average brings its cume up to $157.9 million in its 8th week of release on a $129 million budget. Next up to leave the countdown was Wonder Park from Paramount, which dropped from the number 9 position down to number 15. Wonder Park also took in $730,000, a 66% drop from last week. It lost roughly half of its screens as well, losing 1,109 screens to bring its count down to 1,172. A $623 per screen average brings its cume up to $43.4 million in its 5th week of release on a reported $80 to $100 million budget. The next film to leave the top 10 was 5 Feet Apart from Lionsgate, which dropped from the number 7 position down to number 12. 5 Feet Apart takes in $1.5 million, a 56% drop from last week. The film lost just over 1,000 screens to bring its count down to 1,473. A $1,052 per screen average brings its cume up to $43.9 million in its 5th week of release on a $7 million budget. And lastly to leave the top 10 is Unplanned from Pureflix, which dropped from the number 8 position down to number 11. Unplanned takes in $1.8 million, a 45% drop from last week. It loses only 114 screens to bring its count down to 1,402. A nearly $1,300 per screen average brings its cume up to $15.8 million in its 3rd week of release on a $6 million budget. So Becky, looking at the 4 films that left the top 10, are there any that you're particularly surprised that are leaving as quickly as they have, or perhaps surprised that they hung in as long as they had?
I'm a little surprised Wonder Park's hung in as long as it has. For me, the previews were a little vague as to what the movie was about, which is why I haven't seen it. But it's been around for a while. I mean, it makes sense because it's one of the few animated movies that's out right now. But it is still surprising that it hung around as long as it did, because from what I heard, people haven't enjoyed it.
Based on its scores on Rotten Tomatoes, it's at a 33%, and on CinemaScore, it's at a B+. So yeah, I just think that Wonder Park really missed the mark on a lot of things, from release window to the story to it really wanting to be a Pixar film. And I'm actually surprised that it took 5 weeks to leave the top 10. I figured this was going to be a one and done or 2 weeks and done.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at what else is out right now, there's really not a lot that people can go to see with their kids. That's just something I think about because I'm in Utah. It's a thing.
Well, there is some things to compete with. I mean, this week, as we'll get to, like Missing Link came out from United Artists. Little from Universal opened up this week. I mean, you still have Dumbo kind of hanging around there. 5 Feet Apart also surprised me in the staying power that it had. I mean, only in the last 2 weeks has it taken any significant loss. The $44 million that it's taken in as a kind of genre young adult novel adaptation from Lionsgate was a good platform for both Cole Sprouse and Haley Lou Richardson.
Yeah.
But otherwise, Unplanned didn't really surprise me. I mean, it didn't really have the theater count and the per screen average to hang around. And How to Train Your Dragon after 8 weeks has certainly had what I would call a successful run. Not as well domestically, but worldwide, it surpassed the first film's worldwide take across $500 million. So, it gets to ride off into the sunset now as the concluding chapter to the trilogy, but it had its run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 8 weeks. It's about time to disappear and let something else come in.
Number 10.
So getting into the top 10 now, we'll start off with number 10. Down from number 6 this week is The Best of Enemies from STX Entertainment, which took in $2 million, a 55% drop from last week. Its theater count remained the same at 1,705 screens. Its per-screen average is just under $1,200, and it brings its cume up to $8.1 million in its second week of release on a $10 million budget. The Best of Enemies is a small, intimate story based on a true story from STX Entertainment, which is one of these smaller studios that are trying to kind of carve their path, but they just can't seem to get the real estate at the box office as the major studios can. I mean, you look at what we have coming up, and every film is approaching 3,000 screens, which doesn't really leave much room for the smaller guys. But Becky, have you had a chance to check out Best of Enemies? Are you familiar with the Taraji P. Henson, Sam Rockwell film?
I've seen the trailer. I haven't had a chance to check it out yet. It is on my list to see at some point. I do enjoy films that are based on true stories, especially when they're done well. I'm not surprised that this dropped. I think it's unfortunate, but I'm not surprised that it dropped with everything going on in the world today. The true stories tend to not do as well in the box office, in my opinion, just because people want to go to the movies to escape more than watch a true story.
And also this particular true story, which turns its attention to the idea of race relations in the past. I think audiences and moviegoers probably still are feeling that they've seen this, considering that Green Book tackles a lot of the same issues. So I think maybe Best of Enemies suffers from the feeling from audiences that maybe a bit of a rehash of dialogue that's already been started by Green Book.
Yeah.
It is difficult, especially in the current state of things in the real world, to have to go and watch a film that takes a gritty approach to a real world problem. Granted, this takes us to another time, but it's not a time that we look back on fondly, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Before the film, I think looking forward, it's already at number 10 now. I think we'll be discussing it leaving the top 10 next week. Certainly, it's not going to have the same success that STX's earlier release this year, The Upside, had, which took in over $100 million. But, I mean, maybe this is one that will pick up some traction come awards season when the screeners start going out and people start looking at performances of Taraji P. Henson and Sam Rockwell, who Sam Rockwell I know is traditionally always good in everything that he does, and Taraji P. Henson's been really good at trying to find range in her performances as of late. So maybe this is one that gets a bit of a re-release come awards season, but who knows?
Probably. I mean, Sam Rockwell was in
Three Billboards?
That one. Three Billboards Outside Mississippi. Sam Rockwell was in that, and he did a fantastic job in that, and that gained a lot of attention, but it wasn't well known, if I recall, when it was out in theaters.
Yeah, that was another one that got its attention when awards season rolled around, and it started getting some recognition then.
I could see this doing the same thing.
It seems to be that way. I mean, it's very strange how you have these films that get released after awards season has ended, which most people think, well, it's too early to release and then be remembered 9 months later when awards season rolls around again. But there have been other films that, have done it in the past. That particular film, Three Billboards, was the same way. I mean, usually the highly sought after time frame of release is usually that December, January release time period, leading right up to the Golden Globes and the Academy Awards, but one can hope. I'm going to try and check out this film. I think it's great that a small story like this, it's a true story, by a small studio, gets enough of a push to be on 1,700 screens and not just the usual, New York, LA release, because I would never get to watch anything if these smaller films were put out just in New York and LA.
Yeah.
Number 9.
Moving on to number 9 in the countdown, it's our first new release of the week. It's Missing Link from United Artists, which took in $5.8 million. It opened on 3,413 screens, a per-screen average of $1,712, not something to write home about. Here it is, the latest in stop-motion animation from Laika, who previously fans would know did Kubo and the Two Strings, the Box Trolls. Most notably, you had Coraline and Corpse Bride, Paranorman. These are all from Laika Studios, but Missing Link seems to be, again, missing the mark. I mean, this is the lowest opening for any of Laika's releases. Becky, what do you know about Missing Link, and what can you tell us about what exactly was Missing Link missing?
I've seen the trailer as I've gone to the movies. The trailer for me was a miss. It's not one that I would pay to see in theaters. I'd probably wait to Redbox it and save a couple bucks. It's got a great cast, which is unfortunate that the trailer wasn't more appealing. To me, it was not something that I'm like, oh, I've got to see this when it comes out.
Yeah, I mean, because it certainly wasn't a lack of marketing or advertising. I mean, I saw stuff for Missing Link everywhere, so I don't really know. I mean, one of the main differences I did notice from the previous Laika films is this one was released by United Artists. Previously, Laika's releases came out through Focus Features. I don't know if that has anything to do with it. whether Focus knows better about, where to roll the film out and not just kind of blanket it to 3,400 screens. But I mean, looking at the opening $5.8 million to compare it to its peers, Kubo opened to 12.6 million, Paranorman 14 million, Coraline 16.8 million, Box Troll 17.2. So Missing Link is just a country mile away from these in terms of its opening weekend. I don't really know where it missed the mark on this. It's got a great cast. It's got Hugh Jackman, Zoe Saldana, Zach Galifianakis as the Missing Link. I don't really know where it fell short this time around for Laika.
My guess would be story, just based on the trailer and the fact that it hasn't done well. I would guess it's the story or the lack thereof that isn't compelling audiences and attracting them.
Yeah, I mean, also this idea of this creature like the Missing Link. I mean, it's not too far removed time-wise from Smallfoot, which came out, and yesterday I went to the movies with my daughter and my wife, and they played a trailer for Abominable, which is also about trying to take this abominable creature from the city back to Mount Everest. So, this whole idea of reuniting large mythical creature with its family seems to be a recurring story theme. And I don't know, Missing Link maybe suffers from being the middle child of that. I think Abominable will do better in that more time would have elapsed since the release of Smallfoot.
Yeah, the thing that attracted me to Smallfoot when I saw it was they had a good cast. They had musical numbers. I'm a sucker for a good musical number. And the story was good because it dealt with fear and people being different, which is very much a tie-in to what's going on in the world today, but it shows how they dealt with it in the cartoon, which was very clearly communicated through the trailer, and the story did justice to what they were trying to communicate. Missing Link, like I said, the trailer it didn't have anything compelling to it for me. So honestly, I think it's a story problem. It's like Wonder Park. The trailer just doesn't draw the audiences in because people aren't really sure what the story is about.
For Missing Link, again, here we see it at number 9. It opens at number 9. Low per screen average. I think this may be another one of those films that we're going to be discussing next week, leaving the top 10. It's unfortunate for Laika because I like the work that they do. They do very innovative and kind of very visually appealing work, but did not strike a chord with audiences, did not catch their attention in a positive way. And critically, it's received well. It's got 88% on Rotten Tomatoes, B+ on Cinema Score. So you're right. The audience is just not there in the same way it was with Wonder Park.
Yeah.
You're listening to The Weekend Take. Visit our Patreon page to become a patron of The Weekend Take, and for as little as $1, you'll receive exclusive content and perks. Number 8.
So moving on to the countdown now, we're up to number 8, and it's our second new release of the week. It's After from Averon, which takes in $6.2 million on 2,138 screens, a $2,900 per screen average. As I mentioned, Cume sits at $6.2 million here in its opening frame. After seems to be where the torch gets passed from 5 Feet Apart, as it's the next in these young adult adaptation. Honestly, I don't know too much about After, aside from the poster that I've seen, and I briefly watched a trailer. And how about yourself, Becky? Do you know much about After?
Until this morning when I started looking at what we were going to be talking about, I had never heard of the movie. I read through the description and some of the reviews. It looks like it is based on a book series, a young adult book series. Just from looking at the poster and reading the description, and then the fact that it's labeled as a drama thriller confuses me because it sounds more like a rom-com in the description than it does a drama thriller.
I think it's really resting on the laurels of its readers, in this case, showing up to go to the movies. Anything that I saw marketing-wise just geared everyone's attention back to it's based on, I mean, even the poster, if you look at the poster, it says based on the worldwide phenomenon, which I must not be part of this world because I don't know what phenomenon they speak of.
Yeah, the poster that I'm looking at right now just reminds me a little bit of Twilight. I've never seen any of those films. I've never read the books. I never understood it, but it kind of reminds me of that, and it's one that I'd walk past and go, okay, and I'm going to go this way now.
Well, I look at the poster and what is it? I mean, maybe it's because it's rooted in like the old dime romance novels, but why do all these young adult adaptations, the cover and the posters have to be two people almost kissing? Like they're almost there. They're about to kiss. Every Nicholas Sparks, everything that's ever come out is two people almost kissing. And, I look at, this one poster I'm looking at of After right now, and it's two people almost kissing. Like, I don't get it. I feel like we've approached like the motion picture version of like the dime store romance novel.
That's become an increasing thing to draw people. It's an advertising tactic to draw people in that are fans of the books, and people who aren't necessarily fans of the books, but they see the cover and they're like, oh, it's a rom-com. I'm going to go see what it is. Just based on the description, anybody who went expecting to see a rom-com was disappointed.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. I don't see this one following the same trajectory as something like 5 Feet Apart had from Lionsgate, also a young adult novel adaptation. And maybe that's the difference. In 5 Feet Apart, the poster, they're like 5 feet apart. We're not getting the idea that they're going to almost kiss. I don't know.
There's something intriguing about the title and the photo. It's like, why are they 5 feet apart?
Yeah.
And so people want to go find out why and what's going on. Whereas compared to this, I've been there, done that, seen it. Don't need to see it again.
The scores on this one are not promising at all, which is why, as I mentioned, there's 3 films coming out. So 3 films got to go. Part of me thinks it will be this week's 8, 9, and 10 being After, Missing Link, and Best of Enemies. Because for After, it's got a 13% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is horrible.
Yeah, ouch.
Only up until today, it was the only thing that was trending worse was Hellboy, but Hellboy managed to scrape its way up to a 14% on Rotten Tomatoes. But After only has a B at CinemaScore, and that's the exit polls of audience members as they're leaving the theater. I would take a bet that After will either leave or just clutch itself onto number 10 for next week, but I don't see as successful of a run for After and for Averon here, as they've got 2 strikes against them in 2019.
Yeah.
Number 7.
So moving on to the countdown now, we're up to number 7. Down from number 4 this week is Us from Universal, which took in just under $7 million, a roughly 50% drop from last week. The film lost 744 screens to bring its count down to 2,768, still averaging over $2,500 per screen as it brings its cume up to $163.5 million here in its 4th week of release on a $20 million budget. Looking at Us, Becky, from Jordan Peele, did you get to see Us yet, or are you familiar with Get Out? Were you able to see Get Out as well?
I actually haven't seen either. I don't do a lot of horror movie viewing. I'm usually disappointed, but from what I've heard, both of these are great, so they're on my list to see at some point. I do love seeing that Universal is doing horror movies again, because that's what they're known for, but they kind of went away from that. We're doing things like The Mummy and King Kong, and now they're starting to get back into the horror business, which is awesome. The fact that Jordan Peele has done it again and audiences love it, from what I've heard, is wonderful. I'm very excited for him, and I love the fact that he's doing horror movies that are different than the traditional horror movie.
I mean, I'm glad to see horror movies that don't rely entirely on jump scares.
Yeah.
Good storytelling can be scary. Who would have thunk it?
Oh yeah, that's something that I've noticed, which is why I quit watching horror movies, because usually it felt like the ending to me was slapped on. I'd get so invested in a movie and it would be really good, and then the ending just happened and the movie's over, and I was like, what just happened? Did we run out of a budget? Which is why I quit watching them. I was always disappointed with the lack of story and the lack of thought as to how it was going to end. So yeah, I'm very excited that Jordan Peele, this is his 2nd film that's doing extremely well. And I love the fact that his casts are different than the stereotypical horror movie. I mean, they're people of ethnicity, which is wonderful.
And looking at Us versus Get Out did not open big. It had a modest opening, but it really picked up steam and was a very slow burn. Get Out only opened to $33 million when it came out, en route to making $176 million. That traditionally is not how a movie ends its run, opening on $33 million. It doesn't normally work that way. Now, Us, on the other hand, did open very large. It opened over $71 million, and its weekends have followed a more traditional 50% drop or thereabout, and it's up to $164 million roughly. At this point in time, it's $30 million ahead of where Get Out was, but I feel like they're going to end their runs respectively at around the same box office take. I mean, either way, this is great for Jordan Peele. I mean, Us had a $20 million budget. Sure, they gave him a bigger budget because Get Out only had, I think, like a $9 million budget. But this will certainly allow Jordan Peele to tell the stories that he wants to moving forward. And instead of having to wait a few years between films like Get Out and Us and whatever comes next, we get to see Jordan Peele tell stories every week, because he bravely took the mantle of revitalizing Twilight Zone, which I don't know if you've had a chance to check out any of the new Twilight Zone yet.
I haven't. I've been a little too busy to start a new show, so haven't, but it's on the list.
I cut the cord with cable so many years ago. My only option is streaming, and Twilight Zone, much like the new Star Trek series, is exclusive to CBS All Access, and there's nothing really else CBS has to offer to make me want to pay monthly to stream it. So I guess I'll just have to wait for somebody else to pick it up to check it out, or find other ways to stream it, I suppose.
Yeah.
But for us, looking ahead, as I mentioned, I think now here in its fourth week of release, $7 million this weekend, $164 million total. I imagine it will probably have, I'm going to guess, 2 more weeks in the top 10. It will likely end its run around that same 175 to maybe $180 million for its total run, which is the same as Get Out. But that's not to say that Us opened bigger and fizzled out faster. No, it's just, it was much more front loaded on the hype than Get Out was.
Yeah.
Number 6.
Moving on to the countdown now, we're up to number 6. Down from number 5 this week is Captain Marvel from Buena Vista and Disney, which takes in $8.6 million, a 30.6% drop from last week. The film lost 598 screens to bring its count down to 2,975, still averaging just about $2,900 per screen, as it brings its cume up to $386.5 million here in its 6th week of release and approaching the $1.1 billion mark worldwide. So for Captain Marvel, are you much into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, comic book movies? Are you familiar with Captain Marvel?
I am. I've seen it twice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And what were your thoughts?
I love the fact that we have a kick-ass woman, female character who doesn't need a man and who stands up for herself and embraces who she is. I think as a woman and a filmmaker, like, we need more women like this in film.
More women like Captain Marvel or more women like Brie Larson?
Both. When I saw it the first time, it was opening weekend. We were in the theater. It was a packed house. And there were a few points in the movie that I found myself like cheering. I'm like, yes! And I did it out loud, didn't even realize I'd done it. And there were like 5 or 6 other women that did the same thing. And it was moments that I'm like, yeah, you feel me. You've been mansplained too. You get it. Like, before even the first trailer for Captain Marvel ever came out, there was a thing that went around about the fact that the studio execs had seen some daily footage, and they sent a message to Brie Larson asking her to smile more in fight sequences. And she went through and she took all the Avengers, the male Avengers, and CGI'd the smiley faces on them to show them how ridiculous that request was. Like, they picked the right person to play Captain Marvel because she's taking a stand. She's like, that's not the way it is in reality, and that's something like I've had people tell me, you should smile more. People will want to work with you. That has nothing to do with anything.
No.
They'll want to work with me because I work hard, I do my job, and I do it well. What
is she going to be smiling about? And who gets into a fight in any intense moment and just grins about it? Who does this?
No one. Unless you're the villain. But that's even, that's select cases. It's not always a villainous thing to do, but that is more of a villain thing to do, and she's not a villain.
No. I mean, if I had to say anything to Marvel and to Disney about Captain Marvel is, I wish that they would have introduced Captain Marvel and this story earlier in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because I think a lot of the backlash from some of these fans who aren't doing all their research are upset about is they think that Brie Larson and Captain Marvel are just going to come into Avengers Endgame and just save the day and be the big game changer. Do your research. There's no evidence that says Captain Marvel is the cavalry. Let it go. Or, crazy thought, go to the movie with an open mind, sit down, the lights turn off, and you watch a movie and you're entertained.
I did the same thing when they did the first Trek film back in, I think it was 2009. I was so caught up in what it actually, I had to see that movie 4 times and remind myself after the first time, it's a parallel universe. It's okay. And so that's, people have latched on to what they deem as canon, which it is. I mean, the comic books and everything else. And so they're expecting these guys to follow that same storyline, and it's not going to be exact. And the reality is yeah, we've invested ourselves in the Marvel universe for the last 10 years with Captain America and Iron Man and all these guys, but their contracts are up. They've got to bring in new blood at this point because a lot of them aren't renewing contracts.
You can't drum the same beat forever. Like, you got to change it up a bit, and that's what Endgame is going to introduce, a sort of changing of the guard. It certainly seems like Captain Marvel is part of that changing of the guard. I mean, Brie Larson's is signed on for, I believe, between 6 and 8 Marvel films.
That's the thing. People get so caught up with these guys playing one character that they forget, hey, these guys have lives and they have other things and other projects they want to be a part of. And at some point, we've got to let them do that.
If I had to pit Brie Larson as Captain Marvel up against Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. If the two universes clashed, who would come out on top?
Ugh, that's a tough one. I would say Captain Marvel.
Okay.
Wonder Woman was a great movie. I love Gal Gadot. I think she's done a phenomenal job with the role. I'm excited. I think there's another one in the works, which I'm excited to see.
Wonder Woman 1984, which comes out next year.
Awesome. No, I would just say Captain Marvel because for me, I think the characters. I think Wonder Woman still, from what I've seen, is still like discovering who she is. And there's a lot of power for a character when they know who they are. I think Wonder Woman's close. I don't think she's quite there yet from the first film.
Okay.
And so I think Captain Marvel would win just based on that.
We're at 1-1 because last week's guest, Dan Ventresca, picked Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. So for Captain Marvel, looking ahead at $386 million domestically, looking at the 21 films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Captain Marvel's currently at number 8. It's only $3 million away, as I said, from Guardians 2, which is at $389 million at number 7. I think Captain Marvel should easily overtake that number. I don't think it'll quite reach number 6 on the list, which is Captain America Civil War at $408 million. But nonetheless, at $1.1 billion, the biggest winner in all this is certainly Marvel and Disney.
You're listening to The Weekend Take. Visit our Patreon page to become a patron of The Weekend Take. And for as little as $1, you'll receive exclusive content and perks.
All right. Well, now we've reached the point in the show where we take it aside and get to know our special guest a little better. As I mentioned, this week we have actor, writer, and producer for Never Surrender Films, Becky Haney. Becky, tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do and your journey to this point.
I got started in theater and got my theater degree with an acting emphasis. Never acted in a single thing while I was in college, but I got my degree and I finished and I decided to switch over to film, and it's been an adventure ever since. I'm in what we call a small pond here in Utah compared to bigger markets like New York, LA, Atlanta. So a lot of what happens here usually are indie films. So for the last 9 years, I've been focusing on acting, but a couple years ago, I jumped in and started writing, and I've written a feature film that I'm working on getting the funding for. And then last year, I had a crazy idea and decided to do a series. So I wrote 10 episodes for season 1, been filming that on basically no budget, which has been even more of an adventure. That's pretty much where I'm at.
Can you tell us a little bit about your series?
Yeah, so it's a sci-fi series that's set 400 years after the Third World War. Earth's cultures have separated and they've all headed out into space after the Third World War to avoid further conflict. And now, 400 years after that, Earth's people they're trying to reunite and reconnect with the different cultures and see what people have learned and how the cultures have changed. And through the course of season 1, we find out that some fared well, some didn't. That lead to the huge, shocking season 1 ending that I won't give away.
When it's done, where might we be able to find it, and what's the title?
The title is Fleet. Right now you can find it on Instagram and Facebook, the fan pages for that. It's just Fleet the series. As to where it'll be shown when it's done, that is still to be determined. We're hoping to find a distributor and get it distributed or picked up by an online platform so that it can continue, because season 1 ends and it's open for it to continue if we do get picked up.
This is definitely 100% DIY. Tell listeners a little bit about some of these adventures in making Fleet come to life.
Well, when I started writing it, I started thinking about making it happen, and I realized the only way to do this, I was going to have to do it myself. And then it was like, well, I'm going to need a space to do it in, but I didn't have the funding or the money to rent out a studio and do that. And so I turned my house into a spaceship to be able to shoot this. So my lower 2 floors have flat walls stashed everywhere and props and light up consoles, all stuff which I had people come help me make. I've labored over just the consoles themselves for far longer than I care to admit, just to add production value. And so this is literally a labor of love, not just for me, but for the cast and the crew. This is a deferred pay project because, as I said, I have no money, but somehow I got 70 people to say yes.
Wow.
And that's just the actors. And they have all had so much fun, which I'm so happy and so grateful for. The last weekend we shot, we ended up turning my garage into a jungle, which was pretty cool how that turned out, because literally we were in like a 10-foot by like 8-foot space to shoot all these jungle scenes. For some reason I had written in lots of jungle walking, so I had like 10 people walking through this 10-foot space. I mean, we made it work, and we had a dolly, and so it gave us a little bit more, make it look like we had more space than that. It's very much a make it work project, and we've come up with some amazing solutions to issues, and we've done some awesome things with the small space that we have and the limited amount of supplies and various other things. Like, our consoles are built entirely from recycled wood. We went dumpster diving for that wood to make those happen. And it's been an adventure. I've done a lot of things I never would have thought I would have done, dumpster diving being one of them, to make it happen. And we've had far, far too much fun most days with this group. And I'm very, very lucky to have the group that I have that has said yes and continues to come back and be a part of this crazy adventure that we call Fleet. A lot of my cast has shown up and helped paint walls. They've helped paint flats. They've helped build the flats. They've helped on the consoles. They've helped with props. And so it's very much a hands-on project, and we wouldn't be where we are in the process of production without everybody's help. And my actors showing up ready to go, off book for the most part. They've all come and contributed such amazing things to this that I never would have thought of as the writer. And I'm very, very fortunate to have this group of individuals who have said yes and who have wholeheartedly embraced this crazy idea. Considering it's no budget, and it's in a house, and we've had to construct this spaceship and make it happen, it's something I'm very proud of.
Well, it certainly sounds like it's taken a village.
Oh yeah.
This is great for, people listening who are also independent filmmakers, and that, because I know a lot of people, when they set out to make a project, some of them hesitate to pull the trigger because they want to know the clear-cut path for the project from start to finish and where it'll exhibit. What they have to understand is that's not how every project proceeds.
That's the common thing that people fall into in this business when they're starting out. I mean, I did it for a long time, is the belief that there's only one way to make a project happen. I had a conversation with a friend of mine who's an actor in this, and she brought up a valid point that usually when you're doing a series, you shoot the pilot episode and that's it. And then you go out, you market it. And I told her, I said, I would love to have stopped at the pilot, but for whatever reason, I feel very strongly we need to just shoot all 10 episodes.
I know there's many different approaches, but I think the one that you're taking helps the viability of Fleet as a project, in the sense that, well, I don't have to tell you. I can show you where I intend the season to go.
We'll find something. I'm not worried about it. This is something that has been a passion project for all of us, and there's something coming for us. I just don't know what it is at this point. I'm just along for the ride, because this has definitely taken on a life of its own, which is awesome to see, and it's a lot of fun, and we're having far too much fun making it. So hopefully somebody enjoys it when all is said and done.
Aside from Fleet, what else, if there's time for anything else, what else have you been working on or have worked on that listeners could check out?
I've got Never Surrender Films has a YouTube channel. There's some previous work on there that we've done short film wise. After we wrap Principles of Photography on Fleet, I've already talked to a number of people about organizing some short film shoots later this year, in addition to hopefully finally locking some stuff for my feature film. That's how we met, is you cold contacted me after seeing it on IMDb that it was in development, and I didn't have a DP yet for that. So exciting stuff started happening with that, as far as like small steps towards locking funding and locking some big name actors and stuff on that. So that's exciting too.
You at liberty to discuss a little bit about what Enemy Unknown is about?
So Enemy Unknown is a story about a Vietnam veteran who, survived a horrible experience, and 40 years later, the past comes back to haunt him. There's a short teaser up on, I believe, the Facebook fan page. It's just Enemy Unknown Film. It's also up on the website for the film, which is enemyunknownfilm.com. But the teaser's up on that. I think it's also up on the neversurrenderfilms.com. That would be the best place to go and check out the teaser that we made. Again, on no budget, just with what we had, which honestly I think is the best way to learn how to do film, is by starting with nothing, in my opinion. That's been my road, so.
100% in agreement on that. I mean, I did not attend film school. I got out of high school, went to college for a little bit, but decided I wanted to get into the industry. And yeah, I learned, by doing. 17 years later, after first getting into the industry, happy to say that, this is what I do for a living, cinematographer. So, and part-time hosting a podcast.
Hey, you do what you gotta do. That's the thing. And my mind is blown at how much I've done to make Fleet happen. And that is something I've noticed that sets people apart in this business. Is I've had a number of people approach me and they find an excuse to prevent themselves from doing anything. It's like, if you want to do it, then do it. Stop making excuses and make it happen. It's all over in the industry. It's all over in life. If this is what you want to do, then make it happen and stop making excuses. That's a side note, but
looking ahead through 2019, what is on the horizon for you?
Finishing Fleet, reclaiming my house is basically at the top of the list at the moment. I'm like counting. I got like another month and I'm like, yay, I get my house back. So I'm very excited about that because I've been doing Fleet and I'm attracting things. I've had a lot more auditions lately, which is awesome. And they're not for just 5 and unders. Like, I've had some really substantial, awesome auditions as of late. So I'm very excited to see what comes of those. I'm going to be taking my first trip out to Atlanta to actually like spend a couple weeks and start networking out there. So I'm excited for that. I'm also in talks with somebody out there to do a short film while I'm there, which will be awesome. That's basically what's on my to-do list. Hopefully locking some big names for Enemy Unknown, to attract some more potential investors. And that's basically my 2019 right there.
If someone out there wants to get in touch with you or learn more about Fleet or Enemy Unknown or Never Surrender Films, what's the best way to do that on social media or otherwise?
Social media, it's just the name, Never Surrender Films. Fleet the series is going to be on Instagram and Facebook. There's also the neversurrenderfilms.com, which is the website. There's a button there if you want to get in touch with me. Enemy Unknown has a Facebook page, an Instagram page, a Twitter, and the website. So any of those mediums, you can get a hold of me because I'm the point of contact. So if you fill out a form or just send an email to neversurrenderfilms@gmail.com, it's the way to get a hold of me.
Becky, I certainly appreciate you taking the time to tell us a bit more about yourself and your projects, particularly Fleet. I'm interested and excited to check that out when it's ready. We're going to get back into our countdown now, but get more of your insights on the films that are still ahead here in our top 5. But I certainly want to thank you for taking the time to tell us a bit more about yourself.
Thank you for the opportunity, Sean.
You're listening to The Weekend Take. Visit our Patreon page to become a patron of The Weekend Take, and for as little as $1, you'll receive exclusive content and perks. Number 5.
So getting back into our countdown now, we're up to number 5. Down from number 3 this week is Dumbo from Buena Vista and Disney, which took in just under $9.2 million, about a 50% drop from last week, losing 553 screens to bring its count down to 3,706. The film's averaging just under $2,500 per screen, as it brings its cume up to $89.9 million here in its third week of release on a $170 million budget. So for Disney, looking at Dumbo as the latest of their live-action reimaginings, Dumbo seems to be another one of these projects, much like talking about Missing Link earlier, that seems to miss the mark somewhere. And it's another one I don't really know why. You're talking about Dumbo, which is one of the most beloved animated features that Disney's put out, paired with Tim Burton, who is, again, a very prominent director. That's a favorite of a lot of people out there. But looking at the numbers, from a business standpoint, which Disney has to look at, the film opened very small, only about $46 million. But even looking at here, after 17 days in release, it's at $89.9 million. That's still smaller after 17 days in release than most of the live-action reimaginings opening weekends. What is Disney doing wrong here that Dumbo is underperforming as much as it is?
So I have a confession to make. I've never seen Dumbo. The original, I haven't seen the remake either. I'll probably end up seeing the live action version just because of the cast. But my guess, and from what I've heard, I think it's a story problem. And it's Tim Burton, and Tim Burton stuff is usually pretty dark. From what I've seen of the animated feature, it's not as dark as Tim Burton's made it to be, so that might have something to do with it. But like I said, I know the gist of the story, but as a kid, I was never allowed to watch Dumbo.
Huh. Any particular reason why, or just...
Well, according to my mother, it was because they took the mama away.
Oh, yes, I could see that. But, I mean, did you watch Bambi? as a kid?
No, I wasn't allowed to watch Bambi either because, again, according to my mother, the mama dies.
Yes, there's a hunter that shoots Bambi's mom, yes, in the opening of the
I finally did see Bambi at the age of 27.
film.
And I called my mother and I said, okay, yeah, the mom dies, but this story is nothing to do with that. It's about sex and preventing forest fires. She was like, I can't believe you just said that. And I said, well, it is. This is what happens when you watch it as an adult. Dumbo has never been one that appealed to me necessarily to see, which is why I haven't gotten around to watching it. The people that have seen it, and from what I've heard, they didn't like the characters. The only thing I've heard a positive comment on was Danny DeVito, which is a little unfortunate just because you've got Michael Keaton and Colin Farrell, and I mean, it's a good cast.
Yeah, it's a great cast, and it's again, these are all contributing factors that just continue to baffle me. Then why it fails? Because I think Disney, from the development standpoint, checking off all these boxes that should translate to box office dollars, and here it is, just not.
In all honesty, like the remakes these live action remakes that Disney has done, I was disappointed with Beauty and the Beast. Same with Cinderella. Like, I liked the elements that they kept from the animated version. But like Beauty and the Beast, I felt like added in like all this other information that detracted from the story a little bit. And so it sounds like they did the same thing here with Dumbo. Disney's a little hit and miss for me.
And which is why I don't think the underperformance of Dumbo will deter them at all in proceeding forward with their other planned live action reimaginings. I don't see it affecting Aladdin or Lion King, but I can't see them looking at Dumbo and going, oh, maybe we should rethink this.
This live action thing is a new take, but it also ties into that Hollywood's run out of original ideas a little bit.
That was a whole talking point in our opinion segment last week. This culture that we've fostered in motion picture industry about doing remakes and sequels and prequels and spin-offs and adaptations and reimaginings and this whole list of buzzwords that we've used. So eventually a tipping point will come. I don't know what it's going to be. Obviously, it's not going to be Dumbo's underperformance. And so for Dumbo, its prognosis here at the box office, I don't think is favorable. I think with the drop that it's taken this week, I'm going to stand by. I'm not 100% convinced that it'll break $100 million domestically. Maybe it will. I don't know. I think either way, it still is going to be a loss for Disney by Hollywood math. Again, $170 million means $425 million is the quote-unquote break-even point. It's amassed $267 million worldwide. It's not going to grow exponentially. Yeah, I think Disney has, a loss on their hands with Dumbo, but it's not going to stop the juggernaut that is Disney, moving forward.
No, it won't. They'll keep doing what they're going to do.
Number 4.
So moving on to the countdown now, we're up to number 4. Down from number 2 this week is Pet Sematary from Paramount, which took in $10 million, a roughly 60% drop from last week. Its theater count stayed put at 3,585 screens. It averaged just under $2,800 per screen, as it brings its cume up to $41.1 million here in its second week of release on a $21 million budget. I was pretty blunt about it last week. I will continue to do so this week. I don't have any particular interest in seeing this remake. Becky, I know you said earlier you weren't really into the horror films, and so I don't know if you have interest in seeing Pet Sematary, but what are your thoughts on it as a remake?
I used to be really into horror movies, and then I was just disappointed so many times that I gave up. I think the one that did it for me was The Ring. Actually, I'd given up on horror before that, and then I had to watch The Ring in college as part of a film lit class, and I was just like, why? Americans can't do horror, and that's about the time I definitively gave up horror movies. I know that this is a remake. I've never seen the original, but at what point do we stop making remakes of everything? That's my biggest issue, and so I have zero interest in seeing it because it's like it's yet another remake. There are original ideas out there. The problem with Hollywood right now is it's very hard to give anyone a chance if they're not proven. And so instead of like going out and looking for new talent, they've fallen into this pattern of, oh, we'll go with so-and-so who's proven themselves and we've used them before and we'll have them do this remake that we want to do because we made all this money on it. It's just my take on it from an outsider's perspective, but I'm tired of the remakes. It's like it was done.
And the worst part is, as I mentioned, $41.1 million, $21 million budget. worldwide it's at just about $77 million. It's a profitable vehicle for Paramount, which will not deter them then from continuing to do it. And I felt the same way when they decided they were going to remake it, when Chapter 1 came out last year and Chapter 2 is coming out this fall. I had no interest in seeing it. Tim Curry is Pennywise. Nobody can tell me differently. Just like Tim Curry is Dr. Frankenfurter. It's not me being stubborn or stuck in my way of thinking, but cannot envision anybody doing it better than them. I don't get the remake culture that we're in. I hope there's a cure for it soon.
That would be nice, because I'm really tired of seeing all the remakes. Most of the time they're not good, and my biggest issue is they get these people who are doing the remakes who don't know the show or the movie.
We're talking about remakes, in the top 10, in the top 5, because we got Pet Sematary that we're discussing now, and we get to do it all again in a moment with Hellboy. So looking at Pet Sematary, a 60% drop its second weekend is about what I expected. I mean, really, it doesn't matter where it goes from here. It's going to be profitable for Paramount. It's going to get hurt really bad next week, because there's another horror film coming out next week that, while not a remake or a sequel, is within the Conjuring universe. That being the Curse of La Llorona is coming out. That Conjuring universe typically equates to box office dollars. So Pet Sematary will be hurt by that next week. Won't leave the top 10. Probably has 2 more weeks still in the top 10. But really, I mean, pun intended, I can't wait to bury it and be out of the top 10, because I just don't want to talk about it anymore. So I won't. We're going to move on, if that's all right with you.
That's fine. I got nothing else to say other than Hollywood needs to stop making remakes.
Number 3.
We say that, but here we are, number 3, and it's our third new release of the week, and it's Hellboy, another remake from Lionsgate, which opened at $12 million on 3,300 screens, a just under $3,700 per screen average here in its opening frame. So this film has been released to not much fanfare at all. It's being trashed both critically and by fans at 14% on Rotten Tomatoes, which it just climbed to 14% today. It originally had 8% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it has a C on CinemaScore. Becky, what are your thoughts on Hellboy?
Is it a remake? Because the article I read was that they were going to do their own thing with it and not reference the previous 2 films at all.
I guess the more appropriate buzzword for it is a reboot.
Okay, there we go.
It's a reboot that's supposed to be a bit more true to the comic book source material. I just don't know. Like, the first trailer they put out for it was complete misdirection. Like, they made it seem like this awkward, trying to be dark humor. And then they realized that was met with extreme amounts of hatred by the internet community. So then they decided, okay, well, let's show them a trailer where we just sever a lot of limbs and a lot of blood and gore and stuff like that. And that'll certainly change their opinion on it. And it kind of did, but it kind of didn't. I'm not saying that Guillermo del Toro's Hellboy with Ron Perlman was perfect, but felt a lot more fun and entertaining than this.
When I watched the trailer for this one, it didn't have the Hellboy feel that the other ones did, so that made me a little disappointed. I know I'm going to end up watching it at some point because it's Hellboy, and I'm a nerd. I freely admit it, I'm a nerd. And I think the biggest sticking point for me is that Ron Perlman isn't Hellboy. The thing that makes me wary, negative reviews aside, is just we have these young up-and-comer guys coming in and not fully understanding or having done their research, and they try to put their own spin on it, and they kill it.
I mean, I looked at the trailer for this new Hellboy. The world they created just seemed very uniform and gray, and like everything kind of hinged upon the gore and the action aspect and David Harbour's portrayal of Hellboy, which again is not Ron Perlman's Hellboy.
Yeah, this is the problem nowadays with too many films. You have to find the balance because it is a collaborative effort. So you have to have a team that works together, especially with the cast. You have to have a good story, and you can't rely too heavily on effects like gore or whatever, which Hellboy to me never was that. I'm open to the franchise being rebooted if it's done well, but a lot of the time anymore, people just don't have the understanding of what it takes to make a successful story. For example, the DC movies. I was so excited that they were doing more Batman movies, and then they've tied in Justice League and all that, but honestly, I think they're some of the worst films I've seen because the stories aren't good. With these superhero movies, it's about finding that happy medium where it's a reality, but there's humor in that reality as well, so that it doesn't take itself too seriously. Because he's got horns on his head. Come on.
Yeah.
And so it's finding that balance. Like, you got to find those lighter moments. You have to find those different levels in storytelling. Otherwise, it gets boring and nobody cares.
Everything in comedy is timing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the other problems that this current iteration of Hellboy had was the comedy's timing is ill-timed. They kind of seem to be shoehorning jokes in at bad times.
Comedy is an art form. For me, I find comedy to be easier than drama, but I'm an odd duck. It's definitely about the timing. It's definitely about the ability to find those moments. Some people just don't see those potential moments as they're going through and making a film, and it's unfortunate.
It's unfortunate for this iteration of Hellboy. I mean, it's certainly not resonating with audiences. And when making a direct comparison, because people will. So here we have Hellboy opens to $12 million, right? You go back to Ron Perlman's Hellboy. The first Hellboy in 2004 opened on just about 3,000 screens. So 300 screens fewer, but it opened to $23.1 million. And then the second Hellboy film, which opened in 2008, that film opened on 3,200 screens. So again, still less than this current iteration of Hellboy opened on. And its opening weekend in 2008, when it was released, it was $34 million. I think there's just a lot of things that missed with this Hellboy, or maybe it's the same feeling people have about other portrayals of characters. Like we talked about, you and I are both in the same opinion that Ron Perlman was Hellboy. Ron Perlman did great as Hellboy, so it's hard to see somebody else take the reins of the role and give it their own spin on it.
I'd agree with that. There are just some movies that shouldn't be remade, and there are some things that shouldn't be recast because the original actor did such a phenomenal job. I think that's a large part of why people have not been happy with it, because Ron nailed the dynamicness that is Hellboy.
Maybe someone takes notice and says, hey, maybe there's some stuff we just shouldn't touch. What do you think?
Hopefully. But I've been hoping that for years, and it hasn't happened yet. So all we can do is keep hoping and move forward.
You're listening to The Weekend Take. Visit our Patreon page to become a patron of The Weekend Take, and for as little as $1, you'll receive exclusive content and perks. Number 2.
Well, moving on to the Countdown Hour, up to number 2, and it's our fourth new release of the week. It is Little by Universal, which took in $15.5 million, opening on 2,667 screens, per screen average of just over $5,800. And as I mentioned, its cume is now $15.5 million here in its opening frame of release on a $20 million budget. So Little, which I just like to call big in reverse, it's one of those repeatedly told tales of the very career-oriented business person who has no time for anything else, stepping on people beneath them to elevate themselves professionally, who runs into this young person who she doesn't take seriously, is trying to cast a curse on her until she wakes up as a 10-year-old girl. Becky, are you familiar with this title, or do you have thoughts on it?
I've seen the trailer. It's big in reverse. It's 13 going on 30. It's a little Freaky Friday, similar to many stories that we've seen already. And from what I saw in the trailer, some of the comedy felt a little forced, just from what I saw in the trailer. I'm a little surprised it's number 2, but then I'm not, again, just because of what else is in theaters right now.
Other films that would appeal to the same demographic as Little are just kind of falling short. I mean, Dumbo, we talked about earlier, is underperforming. Missing Link, just for lack of a better word, bombed out of the gate. Wonder Park and How to Train Your Dragon are no longer really viable options. They're on very few screens. So yeah, kind of left Little to stand alone. My barometer usually for if a film will perform well, it's a family film, is my daughter. My daughter sees trailers for all of these things and tells me what ones she wants to see. And she's typically very vocal about the ones that she wants to see. This was not one of them. I was like, okay, well, this one's probably going to quietly go away as well. But here it is. It's number 2. Nice per screen average. Almost the biggest of the weekend, short of our number 1. And that's by a very small margin. Universal just released at a good window.
Yeah, they most definitely released at a good window. And honestly, I think the humor that was presented in the trailer wasn't for kids. It was more for adults, which is also going to be why kids don't necessarily get the humor. And they may not want to see the film, but there's not a whole lot of films that have opened on enough screens for people to actually see it, except for the 4 in the top 10. So I'm not surprised it ranked where it did, because there's really just nothing in theaters right now that is driving audiences to the theater. And if they're like me, you just show up and you're like, all right, we're going to go see the thing that's playing next. And I think that's what's happened this week is there's a gap between like Shazam and the Captain Marvel leading into Avengers Endgame. And so people are a little limited if they haven't seen it yet. They're a little limited to options as to what's in theaters right now that sounds appealing.
Studios know well in advance that Endgame is coming out at the end of the month to play off of the storyline of Infinity War and Endgame. They had no reason to just sacrifice their films to release to be a victim of Thanos' snap, that eliminates half of them from anybody caring to go see. So very limited menu to choose from going to the theaters right now. So, for little, it's counter programming to the comic book fare that's out right now. Yeah, the adult humor may be over the heads of kids, but the premise would lead families to want to bring their kids, whether they get the humor or not. And now with a lot of kids going on vacation this coming week or next week, I don't anticipate Little going anywhere. If anything, I think it's going to have just as good of a weekend next week. Before we get into our number one, they're big week for Disney. Aside from Star Wars Celebration and dropping the trailer for Episode 9 and the title, Disney also started giving us our first look at their Disney Plus streaming service that's going to be coming out, and the price point, which I guess the price point's like $6.99 per month, which is insane considering that Netflix is $12.99 a month. Disney is really out to kind of build this empire, as they're going to take their toys and not share, because all the Marvel series have pretty much been canceled and finished off of Netflix, and the expectation is they'll be relaunched on Disney Plus when the time comes. Since Disney owns Fox now, like, they're being selective on what goes out, so much so that when Disney Plus launches, they're going to have all 30 seasons of The Simpsons exclusive to Disney Plus. So if you've been watching it on Netflix or Hulu, those days are numbered as well. They're kind of moving forward in a very exclusive manner, and they don't seem to care about losing licensing from other platforms because they think they're going to make it up in subscription numbers. So I guess, Becky, looking at this kind of landscape that Disney's slowly building in this mouse empire, how does this change the game for streaming or for distributors, exhibitors now, like that Disney's taking one step further to just being their own entertainment platform?
I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out for sure. I think Netflix will be fine because Netflix just opened up a motion picture studio of their own. So I think Netflix will be okay. Hulu could go either way. Right now, with the way things are in network television, it's so competitive, and all these different companies are trying to get their streaming services up and running so that they can draw in the crowd. I mean, we were talking earlier about CBS, for example. The fact that that's $6.99 a month, and you get access to anything CBS via that streaming. Disney's just doing the same thing. I do like the fact that it's only $6.99. The question is, how long is that going to last? Because it's Disney.
True.
Disney's got a lot of quality programming. I'm interested to see if they're going to put up the old school Zorro with Guy Williams. I would love to be able to have access to that, because that's one I grew up on, and I haven't ever been able to find it on DVD. Thank you, Disney Vault. I'm not opposed to them having a streaming service. It is frustrating that you have to pay another $7 to get access to their content. However, I mean, if you look at the fact that they're going to have Fox content, Disney content, they'll have all the Avengers content, all of that stuff, it does, in my opinion, almost make it worth it for the $7 a month to have access to all of that, plus their original series that are only going to be on their streaming service. It's a personal thing, and people have to choose for themselves. I mean, I'm one of the ones that caved and paid the $7 to have access to the new Star Trek series. As viewers, we've given these companies so much control as to the platforms that they share the content through, and there's not much we can do about it at this point. I think the thing I'm excited about for the Disney streaming thing is the new Star Wars series. They sound interesting. I'm interested to see what they do with them. Hopefully, because it's Disney, they don't kill them with bad storytelling like Maleficent. It's just going to be interesting to see what happens at this point. It'll also be interesting to see, they have any technical issues with their streaming service, just from it being in high demand. That's one thing I don't like about their website, is I seem to always have issues when I try to log on to Disney.com if I'm getting theme park tickets or whatever. So it'll be interesting to see how they fare.
Do you think that this is a construct that we've almost backed ourselves into a corner over? Because for so many years, people complain, I'm paying $200 a month for cable for 700 channels I don't watch. I want to just pick the channels that I want, and now almost piecemeal getting back to what we were paying for cable anyway, but now just a more select package of channels. You're paying $7 for CBS, you're paying $7 for Hulu, you're going to be paying $13 for Netflix starting in May, $7 for Disney. If you're on Prime, I think Prime's what, $10 a month if you want Amazon Prime?
14.
14. There's other boutique ones like WWE Network is $10 a month. So slowly, you're getting what you want, but they're getting what they want too in profits. So Disney with their Disney Plus, I mean, it's going to gobble up a lot of content off the other platforms, I think. I welcome the service because it's going to give me a chance to see a lot of stuff that I couldn't see at launch. There's going to be over 400 vaulted titles that'll be part of the service at launch. And within the first couple of years, they'll have 50 original series, and they're going to plan on producing 50 original series every year starting in, I think, 2024. They have huge plans. I just don't know what it means for the rest of entertainment and exhibition, because Disney just has this way of gobbling everything up around it to limit its competition.
Well, at some point, though, they're not going to be able to do that, because with the Fox acquisition, there was a whole question of if it was going to give them too much power over the market. So at some point, they're going to be told no. That being said, Disney for me is hit and miss, as it is, I think, for most people. I mean, we've talked about Dumbo, we've talked about the Marvel movies. I mean, if you think about their programming on Disney Channel and stuff like that, it's not the greatest programming, to be honest. Not like it was back in the 90s. Like, back in the 90s, they had some good shows on there. And now it's
cut and paste tween shows.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And so it's great that you're doing 50 of them, but are they all going to be quality? That's the question. It's just going to be interesting to see how it unfolds at this point, because cable TV, satellite TV, in a way, is kind of going the way of the dinosaur.
I think eventually we won't have to worry about shows and time slots. It's just, okay, the show's available Friday. The show's available Wednesday. And it'll go from ratings to streams and downloads. I think that'll be the biggest change in how people watch stuff.
I think that's already happening, to be honest. With technology, most people have already switched to streaming. I'm at a point where I'd rather just wait a day and then log online to this, like, NBC.com and watch the show that way. And it's a lot more convenient, for sure, just because I don't have to wait for a certain time slot. I don't have to, make myself available like I did when I was a kid to watch my show. It's just like, oh, I missed it? All right, I'll get on in a couple days and watch it.
The biggest tell that I got from Disney showing off their new streaming service was one of the things that they're going to make available at launch is their live action adaptation of Lady and the Tramp. My question is, going back to the kind of hit or miss style of some of Disney's programming, will Disney, under this new streaming service, feel strongly enough ahead of time about a project if it's going to be a hit or miss and delegate some releases to theaters, traditional exhibition, or relegate some of those releases to be streaming only releases? Like, let's say Disney Plus was available last November. Do you think Dumbo would have been a traditional theatrical release, or would that have been, you think, a Disney Plus exclusive release?
I think it still would have been a theatrical release. Anything like that where they're doing the live action version and they're spending that much money on it, they're going to try to recoup whatever they can via a theatrical release. At some point, when they have the numbers for their streaming service, it might be worthwhile to release that solely to streaming. But usually stuff that gets released directly to streaming has a very much smaller budget.
Captain Marvel, when it's time for streaming, is the first of the titles of Disney's that will become exclusive to Disney Plus. So Captain Marvel, when it's time for streaming, that will be the first that's going to become exclusive to Disney Plus. So that does make me concerned about, will some of these other streaming services like Netflix and Hulu, will they be okay without any Disney related content?
Like I said, I think Netflix will, because they generate so much original content anyway. Hulu's got some of the edgier original series like Handmaid's Tale and Harlots. They've got a couple other ones that I haven't watched. Seem to be really popular, so it could go either way. It'll be interesting to see what unfolds.
November 12th, the date. Disney Plus gets released to be available to everyone. Yeah, $6.99 a month. Who knows how long that'll actually stick for, again, being it's Disney. Because they also purport that it will be not supported by ads, so you'll be ad-free. So then it's like, well, now your only source of revenue generation is your subscriptions. So I don't know if that'll be a sustainable model.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it feels like it's just one more step in the direction of kind of being this massive entertainment conglomerate that starts to slowly swallow everything up like the recently first image of a black hole that we've seen. It seems to be like that. It's just slowly absorbing and drawing through gravitational pull everything around it, and now it's going to be doing the same in streaming. So it'll be interesting to see what can survive. Hulu may actually be a casualty. If anything, Netflix would swoop in, take whatever content's exclusive to Hulu and take it for themselves to try and combat Disney. This is what Disney does. This is what, you know, kind of the Mickey Mouse empire has become. But it'll be a question of quality over quantity and to see what they have to offer.
For sure.
But being able to see some vaulted titles I haven't been able to see for forever is very appealing to me as well.
Like I said, I'm excited and I'm crossing my fingers for Zorro.
Disney's got a lot of irons in the fire. As entertainment evolves, how much of the pie will Disney have? If you've got the majority, you can kind of dictate what you want and what terms you want. And then it feels like we're just back with a cable company again, because Disney turned around tomorrow or 10 years down the road with their streaming service and said, hey, we know we've been giving it to you for $6.99 a month. Now it's $19.99 per month. What option do you have? I feel like exclusivity is nice to an extent, but not when it really affects the way you consume media. Like, for instance, Star Trek and Twilight Zone exclusive to CBS All Access. Great. Guess I'm not seeing either of those shows because I'm not getting CBS All Access.
Yeah. It's been a hot button discussion amongst Trekkies since before Discovery premiered, so.
Well, we've got one more film left to discuss and then talking about next week, but thank you, Becky, for participating in this opinion segment. Like I said, nothing earth-shattering happening news-wise, but still something to keep an eye on as it comes over the horizon.
For sure. Thanks.
You're listening to The Weekend Take. Visit our Patreon page to become a patron of The Weekend Take, and for as little as $1, you'll receive exclusive content and perks. Number 1.
All right, so we made it. We're here. We're at number 1. And at number 1 for the second weekend in a row is Shazam from Warner Brothers, which took in $25.1 million, a 53% drop from last week. It actually managed to pick up some screens, gaining 89 screens to bring its count up to 4,306. The film averaged just over $5,800 per screen, and it has brought its cume up to $94.9 million here in its second week of release. We talked about earlier Captain Marvel, Becky, but is Shazam a title you've been able to check out or have an interest in seeing, being part of this DC extended universe?
I haven't seen it yet. The trailers intrigued me. I just don't know if it's one, like I said, I'll make it to while it's in theaters. It might be after. But I mean, I like the cast from what I've seen, so I'm sure I'll see it.
I mean, Shazam definitely seems to be, for DC, another step in the different direction that they're trying to take, that they started taking with Aquaman. You know, not being so serious, being a little more lighthearted and knowing where to put those comedic beats in a story, not being so dark and morose all the time. I do worry, though, in terms of DC knowing its identity, how they balance this all out, because sure, Aquaman was fun and very Marvel-like, and Shazam again seems very fun and again Marvel-like and almost bordering on family-friendly, though I think a lot of the advertising is a bit of a misdirection because the whole aspect of being almost big but with superheroes is really all contained in the first act, and then it moves on to more of a legitimate superhero film of good versus evil. But it's not a tempo and a style they can really keep up, because next up on the slate in October is Joker, which is none of the things that Shazam or Aquaman are. I just don't know how DC plans to kind of balance that out to not alienate any part of their audience.
You bring up a good point. I think that's part of DC's problem is they don't know who they are as a franchise exactly. You've got different types of superheroes, and they have to find a level where they can all play at, and I don't think they've ever successfully been able to do that because they've been so stuck in the dark and the brooding and the morose. They need to bring it up a couple levels from that and then bring like something like Shazam down a couple levels to meet it, and I think they'd have it.
Yeah, hopefully they can strike a balance. But I mean, the other issue at hand with Shazam is that while it's taken in this other direction for DC, which is trying to build more goodwill with the audiences, particularly the ones that kind of felt disenfranchised by the films of Zack Snyder in the DC universe, it isn't really performing as well as the aforementioned, darker titles. How does DC kind of take this information in and what do they do with it?
Well, they've got to pay attention to it first, which they've never, if history's an indicator, they haven't really done yet. And then the other thing they need to take into consideration is just what audiences are expecting from superhero films. To me, DC's always been darker than Marvel, just because that's how they've set that tone. The problem is the films haven't found the right level to set themselves at, and they won't unless the big wigs at DC start paying attention and they start going, hey, okay, what do we need to change? What do we need to do?
If they're paying attention, what do you think their takeaway is from Shazam? Because Shazam's going to be the lowest grossing film in the extended universe.
Having not seen it yet, the only thing I could say is that with Shazam, they were trying to fit into this demand for family-friendly content. It's great that they're trying something different, but ultimately, to find what works, you have to find that magic spot. And they're kind of all over, in my opinion, at this point.
I would agree. And they're not helping themselves moving forward. It's still all over the place because you got Joker in October. And then in February of next year, you have Birds of Prey. But then in June, we go back to Wonder Woman. So they're still kind of all over the map. I don't know how long audiences are going to give them to figure out who they are.
I think audiences, at least from my perspective and the people that I've talked with, they'll still go see it, but they're kind of tired and done with DC specifically because they're all over the map. That's one thing that I will say as a positive thing for Disney, for Marvel, is they sit down and when they come up with these announcements, I guarantee they're already talking about the storylines and how they're all going to tie in together. And that's what makes Marvel work so extremely well. And DC doesn't seem to have that.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason why they suspended the idea of an extended universe for now. If DC ends up finding that its identity is we are a studio and this is a movie by movie situation, they won't be interwoven. You're just going to follow what characters you like as they go on their stories, and I guess that'll be their identity. But we'll just have to see. I mean, they're still finding themselves.
Yeah. But you're right. I mean, at what point do audiences say, okay, I'm done, enough's enough? I think with Shazam, we've started to see that they're not going to support everything that DC does.
And looking at Shazam's prognosis looking ahead, I think this is the last week that Shazam enjoys being number one at the box office. I think that whatever drop it takes next week will be enough to have one of the new releases coming out take that spot. Looking ahead to next week, we have 3 films that are coming out. Well, 2 of them are coming out on Wednesday the 17th, and only 1 is coming out on Friday the 19th. One's coming out on Wednesday are going to be Breakthrough from Fox, which is going to open on 2,700 screens. Penguins, which it will be a documentary from Disney Nature, is coming out on 1,700 screens, likely almost exclusively on IMAX, I imagine, but probably some regular screens as well. And then coming out on Friday will be The Curse of La Llorona from Warner Brothers, opening on over 3,400 screens. My guess is The Curse of La Llorona will be number 1 next week. Do you think one of these 3 new releases will take number 1, or somehow does Shazam manage to cling on to it?
I think either one of the 3 new ones will take number 1, or we might see, it's a far-fetched thing, but Captain Marvel might jump back up because the following weekend Endgame comes out. And so if people are watching, doing their recommended Marvel viewing, Captain Marvel would be the last one to watch leading up to Endgame. So we very well could see an increase of people returning to see Captain Marvel and glean whatever else they can leading into Endgame.
And don't forget, in 2 weeks' time, there's going to be the massive 22 film marathon that people can go to. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I think people are nuts, but okay.
You want to watch all 22 Marvel films? It's only 56 hours. You think you can do it?
I'd be fine doing it, but I'd want to do it in my own home, in my pajamas, where it's comfortable.
I thought I was an Iron Man when I went and did up to when episode 7 came out. The theater near me did all episodes 1 through 6 and then episode 7 for Star Wars. That was 18 hours. And I was like, oh my God, it started at 4 in the morning and then episode 7 went on at 7 p.m. I'm like, man, this is the limit. This is the most that anybody could do. No. Marvel said, hold my beer.
Pretty much. And
I would be interested to see, though, if Captain Marvel does get a bit of a shot in the arm with the forthcoming Endgame. I didn't even think about that. I think that's a really good observation. I feel like it's safe to say that Shazam won't be number 1. One of the new releases will take that spot, or Captain Marvel. It may have a long way to climb to get into the number 1 spot, and I know that Curse will open pretty highly, but we'll have to see. I mean, that about wraps it up for us here this week on the Weekend Take. So one more time, Becky, if people want to get in touch with you or connect with you or check out some of the projects like Fleet or Enemy Unknown, how would they do that?
You can go to any of the websites, any of the fan pages on Facebook or Instagram. It's usually just the title of the project. Fleet the Series, Enemy Unknown Film, Never Surrender Films. Never Surrender does have a website as well, which everything's on. And then if you need to get in touch with me, you can do it through any of those mediums or just shoot an email to neversurrenderfilms@gmail.com.
And I'll be sure to put all the pertinent links in the episode description below. The Weekend Take is also on social media. We're on Twitter at Weekend Take. We're on Facebook at www.facebook.com/The Weekend Take. And please check out our Patreon campaign, where for as little as $1, you can become a patron of The Weekend Take and get exclusive access to extended cuts of the episodes of The Weekend Take, in case you want to hear more of the conversation that Becky and I had today. But otherwise, that about wraps it up for us this week. So thank you again, Becky, for being our special guest this week.
Thanks for the opportunity, Sean.
And for everyone else out there listening, I hope you enjoy the week ahead, and we will catch you all next week. Take care. Bye.
You've been listening to The Weekend Take. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and Google Play and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Visit our Patreon page to become a patron of The Weekend Take. And for as little as $1, you'll receive exclusive content and perks.